Hey, my name's Chris Miller, quarterback, University of Oregon, 1983 to 1986.
Chris Miller, what a talent! What a talent! I'm disappointed he didn't have more talent around him, because we clearly saw what he could do when he had some people to throw the ball to and those sort of things. But
Probably one of the most talented quarterbacks I was ever around. Very gifted athlete. I mean, he was an amazing quarterback, and he was an unbelievable basketball player, golfer, just a well-rounded athlete.
You know, he'd go up top, he'd throw it 40 yards, 50 yards, throw it across field or take off running.
he could run, he could throw, great leader, funny guy, won some games, great talent.
He's a guy that, if he hadn't had those concussions in the NFL, I think he could have been one of the best quarterbacks ever.
Chris was a pro all the way through, Everyone knew Chris was going to get drafted, and it turned out he was a first-round draft pick of the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, I moved up to Eugene in 1972, so I think I started watching the Ducks in 73, 74, and I'll never forget sitting in the stands with my mom under a plastic garbage bag watching the University of Washington beat us like 56-0 or 54-0. I think it was 1974, 75. But we sat through the entire game, sat there in the southwest end zone, and I remember that vividly. But I grew up watching Oregon, watching Reggie Ogburn, and we had some good seasons in the late 70s, early 80s, and then I was a good friend with Rich Brooks' family. His two daughters, Carrie and Casey, were a year ahead of me in school and a year behind me in school, middle school and high school. So I kind of knew I was a homebody. I wanted to be part of building something at Oregon. The last 2 years prior to me getting at UVO, they were like 3-8 and 2-9, so the program was really struggling. But I was recruited by Washington State, Oregon State recruited me real hard, Colorado State. So I had different options, but I was kind of a homebody and wanted to be a Duck and kind of help get that thing turned around. I grew up being an NFL fan, so I did that NFL pump, pass, and kick, and got to meet John Brody and Dan Fouts and some of those guys when I performed in the stadium. So I grew up being an NFL fan. I watched NFL quarterbacks. I was a big fan of Dan Fouts, Joe Montana, John Elway, Dan Marino, those guys, and so I kind of emulated them more. When I went out in my backyard, I was one of those guys. I was an NFL guy, but I did enjoy watching Reggie Ogburn play. Reggie was exciting. He brought a lot of flair to the game. He was a pretty good passer, but a fantastic athlete. And then watching Kevin Lusk and Mike Jorgensen trying to run the wishbone was a little bit painful at times. I'm like sitting in the bleachers like, what am I watching here, And Jorgie's a good buddy of mine, so I can rip him a little bit. But, I just felt like Rich Brooks hired Bob Toledo my freshman year when I was coming in as a freshman, and he was going to run a pro-style offense. And so that's why Oregon was really intriguing to me. I think I really didn't know what pressure was back then. I was young and wet behind the ears, and we really didn't focus on that much. The plan was to redshirt me. I was definitely going to redshirt, which I needed to. If you'd have seen me in fall camp, I thought about quitting. I remember we had a scrimmage where I threw a couple interceptions, and I was $172, $175, soaking wet. Playing against Dan Ralph, Steve Bach, guys who hadn't played in the NFL. Steroids were a little bit prominent then, so these were some big dudes. And so my freshman year, I knew I needed to redshirt. I needed to develop. Then Mike Jorgensen hurt his leg against UCLA, and Mike Owens came in and was kind of ineffective. And Rich Brooks called me down at the beginning of the third quarter, and I figured he just wanted to look at my play chart to see what plays we were running. He said, "Hey man, we're going to take the red shirt off you and put you in." And immediately I'm like, what? I'm like panicking and going, oh my gosh, I got to tie my rib pads and put those together. We were down 21-0 at the time, and we got within 21-13. We intercepted the ball, but our guy who intercepted it fumbled with about 2 minutes left, so I was hoping we'd go down and get a chance to tie it up. That was against Rick Neuheisel in UCLA back in the day. So I ended up playing a little over 2 games my freshman year, and it was a good experience. It was a good experience for me. Well, the 0-0 game of infamy, I choose to forget that quickly. I remember I had probably Ladarius Johnson was about 12 or 15 yards away from in the end zone. I was rolling out and threw it right at his feet. Paul Schwabe, our senior kicker, missed a 19 and a 20-yard field goal, which is shorter than the extra point and the extra point distance. I know they missed a short field goal. I think it was just one of those games that was dealt to be the ugly part of the lore of Oregon history, if you would. Going over to Tokyo, I got knocked out of bounds by Rex Moore and USC. I was actually with Sean Salisbury this last weekend. We were talking about that game, and I got knocked out of bounds, landed on some plywood on the sideline, and I still got a chipped bone in my lower right back that bugs me to this day. So I have a fond memory of that game. But it was a great game. I think we lost 17-13, and they had Jack Del Rio and Dwayne Bickett and Tim McDonald. They had some fantastic players who had great NFL careers. So that was a great trip. We had a good time back there. We had more fun than we did really focused on the football game. We had a lot of fun back there. Going against UCLA, one of my first 2 or 3 passes, I threw an interception. Threw an angle route, and I threw it to their linebacker rather than my back. I was so nervous. And but then I led us to 2 scoring drives. I'm like, okay, I've settled in. We're here. I threw a nice fade route to Lou Barnes for a touchdown. And then we went down to beat Stanford on the road. I think 16-9, I want to say it was down there. And that was my first road game, so that was a big win. And then we came back to the stinker game, the 0-0. And then Jordan and I competed against each other the next fall camp. He kind of got the nod. He was going to be the senior, and he started against Long Beach State, and we were getting beat at halftime handily. And then Rich put me in for the second half. I had 3 touchdown passes in the second half. We came back and won. So that's kind of where I took the reins and never relinquished them. But I think then, my confidence grew. Bob Toledo's confidence in me grew. Rich Brooks, and like I said, my senior year, I think we were ranked like 3rd offense in the Pac-10. So we had a pretty prolific offense. We had some good guys. A bunch of guys went and played in the NFL. J.J. Burden, Lou Barnes, Tony Cherry went and played in Canada. Derek Lavelle played in the NFL with the 49ers in Denver. So we had a lot of talent on offense. Yeah, I would like to have been that first bowl game, if you will. I know Billy Musgrave and the team were 6-5 and went and played the Independence Bowl. Basically bought their way into the game by promising, a certain amount of fans would go. We went, I think my junior year, we were 6-5. And, back then you had to have 7 games to be bowl eligible. I mean, USC goes this year, I think they're like 6-6 or something like that, some nonsense. So there's teams that end up 6-7 after their bowl game, that play in the bowl game. Wow, that's ridiculous. But so yeah, I wish we would have, been that program to get us in the first bowl game. But after U of O, like I said, was 3-8, and then 2-9, and then Bob Toledo came in. I came in as a freshman. We had some good talent. We went 5-6, 6-5, and 5-6, and there were some great teams in the league. USC was excellent. UCLA was good. Arizona had the Desert Swarm defense, the Hundley brothers, and Byron Evans, and Chuck Cecil. Arizona State was really good at the time. So there were programs. Washington was outstanding. So there were programs that were better than we were. But we competed with everybody. I mean, we had 2 chances to beat the Huskies. Great chances up at their place when they were number 1 in the country, and then at our place. We beat UCLA to knock them out of the Rose Bowl one year. We lost to USC 35-28 at their place. We were down 28-7 at halftime, came back, had a chance to score late. I hit Lattenberry, and he got caught about a yard short of scoring and tie that thing up. Ted Toner came out to me after the game. He said, Chris Miller, said, you made a hell of a lot of money today after the game, because it was my senior year. Threw for about 386 and 3 touchdowns. It was a great game, just kind of one of those track meet type games. But, as a quarterback, I would have liked to have taken our club to a bowl game. But, it is what it is. We were a stepping stone. We helped build a heck of a program from an offensive standpoint. Defensively, we had some good players. Guys like Dan Ralph and Steve Bach and Anthony Newman, Cliff Hicks, guys that went and played in the NFL. And then Bill Musgrave came in. They got to that bowl game at 6-5. They started getting better recruits. They went and played in Texas or the Holiday Bowl and some of those things. And then the Nike swoosh got involved in '94 after the Rose Bowl year. And the rest is history. There we sit. Our weight room used to be in the East End zone. up underneath the bleachers. And I can just remember going in there with about 108, 110 guys, no air conditioning, upper and lower level weight room area. Then the dumbbell area was up in this small little closet type open space. And how we got air in there was we rolled up a big metal door so we could have some airflow going in there. So, you talk about the weight room now, and they're building all these new amazing facilities, and everything is just top shelf. I think the time we spent with our teammates up in that weight room, busting our butts, putting in the work. I mean, we worked hard, man. We lifted hard. We worked hard. All of us were up in there. Linemen might be in one section. Defensive backers, linebackers, tight ends might be in another. Us pencil necks might be up top, pushing the dumbbell stuff up there. That's what I really appreciate. We had one set of uniforms, one at home, one on the road. The holes in the mesh were about that big. We got one nasty gold colored heavy polyester undershirt type thing, and one pair of shoes, the old Nike shoes, just mesh with the green swoosh on there. So, you know what, we take that stuff, we cherish that. That was when football was legit. It was genuine. Now it's big business. It's big business. Our Oregon coaching staff has done a great job. Rich Brooks setting the table, Mike Bellotti, Chip Kelly taking the baton and rolling with it. Now Mark Helfrich has it. I do. I remember vividly how they got me. My first NFL start in '87 was against the Rams in Anaheim, and I threw one right to Cliff. I threw one right to Clifford Hicks, hit him in the hands, and he picked me. And then I think I had a couple touchdown passes in the second half. They weren't directed at him, or they weren't at him, but I did throw him a pick. I did throw him a crumb, and but I did make amends and have a couple TD passes after that. Then against Anthony Newman. In 1992, he was about 3 or 4 yards from me, and I kind of stuck my foot in the ground when we were playing the Rams to kind of dive down and not get tackled by him. And that's when I tore my ACL the first time on that turf in Atlanta. So, it wasn't his fault or anything, but it was kind of ironic that I was sticking him. So I'm like, hey, I don't want to truck Q, and I don't want Q to blow me up. Let me go ahead and get on down and get away from the hip. I ended up tearing my knee, but we had some good competitions against the Rams. When I had Andre Rison and Michael Haynes, and we had those couple playoff years with the Falcons when Anthony was still with the Rams. We had some good rivalries, and then later when I went to LA and played with them in '94, '95, we were teammates. That was kind of cool. We understand that injuries are part of the game. I was a guy who weighed 208, 210 pounds. I wasn't super big back in the day, and I got a couple really good concussions in 1995, so I had to step away from the game for 3 years. Then I was able to go back and play for the Denver Broncos in 1999. And I'm grateful I was, because I learned a tremendous amount of football from Mike Shanahan and Gary Kubiak, two current head coaches in the NFL. And they had just won back-to-back Super Bowls, so I was able to say, wow. Finally in my career, I'm able to see how a really good organization and team are run. And so I really appreciated that. And but when I started 3 games that year, played really well, got hit on the head again, or on the head again against the Raiders on Monday Night Football, and kind of went through those same symptoms. And I'm like, okay, it's a wrap. I'm done. I know I got to shut it down. Want to have quality of life later in life. And Troy Aikman had to retire due to concussions. Steve Young. Myriads and loads of defensive players have had them, and they're having some severe problems. They're having some severe quality of life problems. So, knock on wood, I feel pretty blessed with my. Knock on wood, I can't say this, right? I feel pretty blessed with my health and how I feel now, and hopefully won't have any later issues in life. But I was able to play 10 years and have a good, solid career, and made a lot of friendships, learned a lot from it. And now I'm able to kind of pass that along to the youth and kids I coach now, which I cherish. I enjoyed the NFL. The 3 years I was a quarterback coach, I got to work with Kurt Warner and learned a tremendous amount of football. But my passion and my calling is I'm blessed to be able to pass those things along to high school age kids who are impressionable to, not only can you teach them the X and O's of football and teach them at a really high level, which helps them be successful, but I can get them prepared for life after high school, for college, for work, for becoming a husband or a father. And to me, that's what matters. So I enjoy that coaching part of it. I enjoyed playing, but I thoroughly love the coaching part of it. Oh man, the legacy I want to be remembered as is just a good man, you know, a good person who respected others, treated others with respect, and served other people. You know, did things for other people and provided opportunities, experiences. You know, made an impression on when you meet him, and you know, just remembered for being a good person, much like I remember my father. You know, my dad's still living now, and he's a great man. I never heard him say a bad word about anybody, and he's 82 years old now. So, you know, if you can be respected, if people respect you and you made an impact on them, then that's a good memory for me.